Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review Atoms for Peace, Amok. This is the full-length debut LP of a band fronted by Thom Yorke, sort of a recording project he has going on with Nigel Godrich, who you also may know as the producer of Thom Yorke's debut solo LP, The Eraser. And originally this group had been formed to perform material from that album a handful of years ago when Thom was touring behind it. Now, even though Atoms for Peace is this new band, it's this new album, it's really not all that far off from other Thom Yorke related releases. For one, this album is very electronic and synthetically textured in a lot of the same ways that The Eraser was. And this LP has an extremely kind of rhythmic quality to it, with a lot of looped beats that pulsate mechanically but have a ton of detail and layers to them, just like many tracks off of The King of Limbs. And even though Atoms for Peace is supposed to be a band with billed musicians such as Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers on bass, this does not feel like a live band in really any way, shape, or form. The sounds on this LP feel so rigid, robotic, exact, and meticulous to the point that there is no way whatsoever we are listening to live instrumentation, which isn't really the worst thing in the world. I guess what I'm getting at is that Atoms for Peace is basically just another Thom Yorke solo effort under a different flag. Now, in a way, in comparison to The Eraser, this LP is maybe even more meticulously planned out. The Eraser did have the very rigid and electronic beats that this album has, but that LP also featured some guitar and just waves of instrumentation kind of cascading over those beats. Whereas this new LP, the synths, the guitars, they seem to sometimes be as looped or as rigid as the rhythms themselves. A lot of these beats just kind of follow in lockstep with the guitars and the synths, a lot like many spots from The King of Limbs that were just more beat-oriented. But I actually think that this new LP has a bit more punch. It's got a bit more clarity, it's got a bit more detail, I think. In a way, I actually kind of wish that The King of Limbs sounded a bit more like Amok, because honestly, a lot of the ballads and a lot of the softer spots off of that album, since I have listened to it and have reviewed it, have actually kind of just lost their flavor for me a little. And a lot of the more beat-oriented tracks off of the LP feel so static to me. It's like there's nothing in terms of a groove or a progression that moves me. Amok does bring a bit more progression and some really good ballads. I think it may end up kind of getting swept under the rug a little bit though, because it just kind of feels in a lot of ways like just typical Thom Yorke. Very icy, very emotional. His nasally wails are all over the place. And underneath these vocals and just the ballads themselves are these layered and throbbing rhythms that just go clickety-clack, clickety-clack. And aside from the vocals, over these beats are all of these tones that are sweet, they're melancholy, sometimes they're kind of glitchy. This LP definitely does have a sound, it has a vibe, but still at the end of the day, it ends up kind of feeling like a collection of tracks because there's not really a huge obvious arc or anything like that to the entire LP. What this LP sounds like to me personally is just further tuning, further alteration of this sound that Thom Yorke has been chasing after since the middle of the aughts. And I actually think with Amok, he's come closer than ever to perfecting it. The song that opens up this LP, Before Your Very Eyes, there's something about this beat that to me says gears, it says switches, it says buttons. But there's something about just Thom Yorke coming in and singing, and I know his voice isn't for everybody, but there's just something about his voice that gives these songs just enough humanity to make them, I guess, bearable, despite feeling so, rigid. And the song itself, structure-wise, is really linear. There's kind of a swell toward the middle of the track that feels like a chorus with all of these synthesizers, all these random sound effects kind of bumping around everywhere, but the rhythm pretty much stays exactly the same as it has been since it kind of kicked in toward the beginning of the track. And that sort of seems to be a theme on numerous songs here. Thom Yorke is trying to basically keep these grooves and keep these beats going flowing and just maintain while changing things over it and giving movement and giving progression to the song, which is something Radiohead also did on The King of Limbs, but there wasn't enough change, detail, or progress to keep the songs interesting to me. The songs on this LP don't pop, they don't really, kind of give you a rush, they don't shift gears excitedly when a chorus kind of comes in. They are much more meditative. They're kind of hypnotic in a way with how they just continue on and just change shades very slowly and subtly. Like the song Unless, which is really one of my favorite tracks on here. It's got this, A, B, C sort of structure with just one part moving into the next part, moving into the next part, and just not really looking back. The song slowly builds into its groove. These bada synths pop in. The rhythms eventually get beefier, they get thicker. Bass eventually introduces itself along with these weird vocal samples of Tom singing popping up all over the mix, kind of encasing my head in the left and right channels with just weird whimpers and moans. Even lead tracks off of this LP, like Default, that I reviewed earlier this year and enjoyed, kind of follow that same pattern. Another track that dropped before this LP as well follows that pattern, Judge, Jury, and Executioner, the acoustic standout on this LP, a song that I like a lot. I feel like this track has one of the best beats on the entire LP, with the reverb moans hanging in the background and this bass line that sounds like like you're kind of recording this throat humming sound and it's being looped, and the bass is kind of equalized very high on it, so it's very resonant. There are a lot of clicks in this rhythm and just oddly placed kick drums. And I think the track has one of the prettier vocal melodies on the entire LP too. My only issue with the song is that I wish it were longer. There's one thing about this track and many other songs on here, rarely does this album really kind of come out and grab my attention or anything like that. However, I don't really think it's boring, because I think the songs and I think the sounds are nice enough to the point where they actually lure me in. But Thom Yorke is just really not at a point now where he's writing those rock songs, those very emotive and somewhat experimental art rock songs that people have loved from Radiohead for so long. Rather, he's kind of taking his vocals and he's taking a lot of the same instrumentation and he's trying to make an electronic song, a linearly structured electronic song. He's trying to apply all of these familiar elements to an electronic structure where you kind of take a groove, you take an idea, and basically for a handful of minutes you sort of not come up with these several different largely contrasted parts in a single track. Really, it's just one subtle change that comes on slowly, another subtle change that comes on slowly. If there's anything I really kind of dislike or I am sort of disappointed with in regards to this LP, there are some nice synthesizers and vocals on this thing for sure that are treated in some just heavy, wet effects, just cavernous, cascading vocals, just layering on top of each other in a really nice way on some of these songs, but the beats feel so freaking dry and flat sometimes. It's like a burnt piece of turkey between two pieces of toast. The sounds can feel really kind of plain if you listen to this entire 40-minute LP from beginning to end. Sure, it does have a style and it does have an approach, but there could be a little bit more texture in some of these beats to make them a little bit more worth sinking your teeth into. The sounds of the rhythms are just mysteriously untreated, like there was a severe lack of post-production in the making of these songs. No doubt there are some cool songs and melodies on this LP, especially nasty grooves like on the song Stuck Together Pieces. There's some detailed instrumentation, and Thom Yorke has improved when it comes to taking this rock instrumentation and applying it to an electronic structure. What this album really could have needed were maybe just some tracks of a different energy level, a different flavor, some different sounds, and the sonic experimentation, that explorative edge that albums like Amnesiac and Kid A have. I'm actually feeling a strong 6 to a light 7 on this LP. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but if you've given it a listen, what did you think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What should I review next? And yeah, that's it. Anthony Fantano, Atoms for Peace. Forever.